stop everything. On May 7, 2025, President Trump signed an executive order that authorizes the largest expansion of interior immigration enforcement in U.S. history. We're talking about a planned increase of ICE enforcement personnel by 40%, the deployment of cooperation agreements with local law enforcement in over 200 jurisdictions, and sweeping new enforcement priorities that could put millions of undocumented immigrants at immediate risk of arrest and deportation. If you're undocumented, if you have family members who are undocumented, if you're a DACA recipient, if you have temporary protected status, or if you're in any kind of legal gray area, what I'm about to tell you could be the difference between staying with your family and being separated from everything you know. This isn't theoretical. ICE raids are already increasing in major cities across the country as of late May 2025, and the communities most affected are scrambling to understand their rights and protect themselves. Stay with me for the next 30 minutes, because I'm going to break down exactly what this enforcement expansion means, who's most at risk, what your rights are if ICE comes to your door, and the 3 critical steps you need to take immediately to protect yourself and your family. Let me give you the context first, because understanding where we've been helps you grasp the magnitude of where we're going. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, is the agency within the Department of Homeland Security responsible for enforcing federal immigration laws in the interior of the United States. That means they're the ones who investigate, arrest, detain, and deport people who are in the country without authorization or who violated the terms of their legal status. ICE has always had enforcement priorities, categories of people they focus on arresting versus people they generally leave alone. During the Obama administration, the priorities were focused heavily on recent border crossers, people with serious criminal convictions, and national security threats. During the first Trump administration, from 2017 to 2021, those priorities were expanded significantly to include anyone in the country illegally, regardless of criminal history, though in practice, ICE still focused more resources on people with criminal records. During the Biden administration from 2021 to 2025, the priorities narrowed again to focus on serious criminals, recent arrivals, and national security risks, and ICE was directed to exercise prosecutorial discretion, meaning they could choose not to pursue deportation for long-term residents with families and community ties who weren't public safety threats. That all changed on May 7th. The new executive order, titled Restoring Interior Immigration Enforcement and Public Safety, eliminates prosecutorial discretion entirely. ICE officers are now directed to arrest and initiate removal proceedings against any individual encountered who is removable under the Immigration and Nationality Act, regardless of how long they've been in the country, regardless of family ties, regardless of community contributions. The only exceptions are people with pending applications for relief that have been formally accepted by USCIS or the immigration courts. So if you have a pending asylum application, a pending U visa application, pending DACA renewal, you're theoretically protected while that application is being adjudicated. But everyone else? You're a priority for enforcement. The executive order also authorizes DHS to increase ICE's enforcement and removal operation staffing by 40% over the next 18 months. As of early 2025, ICE ERO had approximately 6,000 law enforcement personnel. A 40% increase means adding 2,400 more officers, bringing the total to about 8,400 by the end of 2026. Where are they getting the funding and personnel? The order directs DHS to reallocate resources from other agencies, to expedite hiring and training processes, and to request supplemental appropriations from Congress. The House of Representatives passed a supplemental funding bill on May 23rd, providing $2.1 billion for ICE expansion. And as of early June, it's pending in the Senate, where it's expected to pass with bipartisan support from Republicans and some moderate Democrats who are concerned about border security. But it's not just about more ICE officers. The executive order resurrects and expands something called the 287G program, which allows ICE to deputize state and local law enforcement officers to perform immigration enforcement functions. Under 287G agreements, local police and sheriffs can check immigration status during routine stops, detain people suspected of being undocumented, and transfer them directly to ICE custody. This program existed in limited form during previous administrations, but it was controversial and many jurisdictions refused to participate. The new executive order creates financial incentives for local law enforcement to sign 287G agreements. Jurisdictions that participate get priority access to federal grants for equipment, training, and personnel. As of late May 2025, DHS has signed new or renewed 287G agreements with over 200 counties and municipalities across the country, concentrated heavily in Texas, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Arizona, and Oklahoma, but also including jurisdictions in states you might not expect, like Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Virginia. Let me be very clear about what this means on the ground. If you're undocumented and you live in a jurisdiction with a 287G agreement, a routine traffic stop for a broken taillight could result in ICE detention and deportation proceedings. If you're a DACA recipient and your renewal is delayed for any reason, you could be stopped by local police for any reason, jaywalking, loitering, a noise complaint, and find yourself being questioned about your immigration status. If you have temporary protected status from El Salvador or Venezuela, and you miss a filing deadline or your status expires while you're waiting for renewal, you're suddenly vulnerable to arrest by local police who are working hand in hand with ICE. Here's what's happening right now in communities across the country. As of late May, early June 2025, ICE is conducting large-scale workplace raids at levels we haven't seen since the mid-2000s. On May 16th, ICE raided a meatpacking plant in Nebraska and arrested 137 workers. On May 22nd, they raided multiple construction sites in Houston and arrested 94 workers. On May 28th, they conducted coordinated raids at landscaping companies across Northern Virginia and arrested over 200 people. These are targeted operations based on intelligence about specific criminals. These are broad sweeps where ICE shows up at workplaces, demands to see everyone's employment authorization documents, and arrests everyone who can't produce valid status. Workers are being detained, held in ICE facilities, and many are being quickly deported before they even have a chance to see an immigration judge or consult with an attorney. ICE is also conducting what they call targeted residential enforcement operations, which is a euphemism for showing up at people's homes early in the morning and arresting them. Reports from immigrant advocacy organizations indicate that ICE home raids have increased by over 300% in the past month compared to the same period in 2024. They're showing up in addresses where they believe undocumented individuals live. They're knocking on doors, and in many cases, they're using aggressive tactics, claiming they have warrants when they don't, entering homes without consent and arresting not just their targets, but other undocumented individuals they encounter at the residence. Let me give you a concrete example that illustrates how this is playing out. Rosa is a 38-year-old woman from Guatemala who's been living in Charlotte, North Carolina for 12 years. She has 3 children, all U.S. citizens, ages 11, 9, and 6. She works as a housekeeper for a cleaning company. She's never been arrested. She pays taxes using an ITIN number. Her kids are excellent students. She volunteers at their school. On May 24, 2025, she was driving her kids to school when she was pulled over by a local sheriff's deputy for allegedly failing to signal a lane change. The deputy asked for her license and registration. Rosa has a North Carolina driver's license because the state allows undocumented immigrants to get licenses for driving purposes. But when the deputy ran her information, he saw that she had no immigration status. Under the new 287G agreement that Mecklenburg County signed with ICE in early May, the deputy called ICE directly. Within 30 minutes, ICE agents arrived, arrested Rosa on the spot, and took her into custody. Her 3 children were left sitting in the car, terrified and crying, until a neighbor who happened to drive by recognized them and took them home. Rosa is now being held at an ICE detention facility 2 hours away. She's in removal proceedings, and her children are being cared for by a friend because Rosa is a single mother, and there's no other family in the area. This is happening right now to real families in communities across America. Part. We just covered Rosa's story and how a routine traffic stop destroyed her family in minutes. And now we need to talk about the specific enforcement tactics ICE is using under this expanded mandate and who is most vulnerable. Let me walk you through the different types of enforcement operations that are ramping up dramatically right now. First, there are workplace raids, which I mentioned briefly. ICE identifies workplaces they believe employ significant numbers of undocumented workers. Meatpacking plants, construction sites, agricultural operations, warehouses, landscaping companies, restaurants, cleaning services. They show up unannounced, usually in the early morning when workers are arriving or during shift changes when the most people are present. They seal off the exits. They demand that the employer produce I-9 employment eligibility verification forms for every worker, and they conduct what they call interviews, where they ask workers to prove their legal status. Anyone who can't produce valid documentation gets arrested on the spot. These operations are coordinated. They're often hitting multiple locations simultaneously in the same city or region to maximize arrests and minimize the chance that word spreads and people flee. Second, there are targeted arrests based on what ICE calls leads, information from databases, tips from the public, or intelligence gathered from previous enforcement actions. These are the home raids I mentioned. ICE officers show up at an address where they believe a specific individual lives, and they attempt to arrest that person. But here's what's crucial to understand. In many cases, ICE doesn't have judicial warrants signed by judges. They have administrative warrants issued by ICE itself, which under the Constitution do not give them the right to enter your home without consent. But many people don't know this, and ICE officers often use language that's deliberately misleading. They'll say, "We have a warrant," without specifying what kind. Or they'll imply that you're required to let them in. Or they'll simply push their way in if someone opens the door. And once they're inside your home, if they encounter other people who appear to be undocumented, they'll arrest those people too, even if they weren't the original target. Third, there are what immigration advocates are calling community sweeps. ICE officers patrolling neighborhoods with high immigrant populations and stopping people on the street to question them about their status. This is particularly concerning because it raises serious Fourth Amendment issues about unreasonable searches and seizures. Under the Constitution, law enforcement can't just stop you and demand your papers without reasonable suspicion that you've committed a crime. But ICE is pushing the boundaries of this, and in jurisdictions with 287G agreements, local police are doing the same thing. They're setting up checkpoints near day laborer pickup sites, near immigrant service organizations, near churches and schools in immigrant neighborhoods. They're stopping people for alleged minor violations, jaywalking, riding a bicycle without a light, loitering, and using those stops as pretexts to check immigration status. This is general information, not legal advice, but you need to understand who is most at risk under these expanded enforcement operations. Obviously, anyone who is undocumented and has no pending application for legal status is at maximum risk. But there are other categories of people who are also highly vulnerable and may not realize it. DACA recipients whose renewals are pending or expired are at risk. TPS holders whose status has expired or who failed to re-register during the filing period are at risk. People who have final removal orders from years ago but were never physically deported, there are hundreds of thousands of people in this category. Our top priorities for ICE right now: people who have employment authorization documents that have expired even by 1 day are at risk. People who were granted voluntary departure by an immigration judge but didn't leave by the deadline are at risk. Asylum seekers whose cases were denied and who didn't leave the country are at risk. People who overstayed tourist visas or student visas years ago and have been living quietly ever since are at risk. Let me give you another example that shows the breadth of who's being targeted. Miguel is a 24-year-old DACA recipient who came to the U.S. when he was 5 years old. He has no memory of Mexico. He speaks perfect English. He graduated from a university in Texas with a degree in engineering, and he's been working legally at a tech company in Austin for 2 years. His DACA expires in July 2025, and he filed for renewal in April, well before the 90-day advance filing window. But USCIS is currently backlogged with DACA renewals because they're prioritizing naturalization applications and green card cases under the new policies we discussed in previous segments. As of early June, his renewal application is still pending, and his work authorization expires in 3 weeks. His employer's HR department is nervous and has told him he can't continue working if his EAD expires, even though he has pending renewal. On June 2nd, Miguel was leaving his apartment to go to work when he was stopped by ICE agents who were conducting surveillance in his neighborhood looking for someone else. They asked to see his documents. He showed them his DACA approval notice and his EAD. They ran his information and saw that his renewal is pending but not yet approved. Under the new enforcement directives, pending applications are supposed to provide protection, but the ICE officers claimed they weren't sure about DACA specifically and detained Miguel anyway for verification. He spent 18 hours in ICE custody before his attorney got him released with a notice to appear for a credible fear interview. Miguel's entire life has been thrown into chaos. He may lose his job because he missed work without notice. He now has removal proceedings initiated against him, even though his DACA renewal should have protected him, and he's traumatized by the experience of being detained. Now, let's talk about what your rights are if you're encountered by ICE, because this is absolutely critical and could determine the outcome of an encounter. First and most importantly, you have the right to remain silent. You do not have to answer questions about where you were born, what your immigration status is, how you entered the country, or anything else. The Fifth Amendment protection against self-incrimination applies to everyone in the United States, regardless of immigration status. If ICE stops you and asks questions, you can politely say, "I'm exercising my right to remain silent, and I want to speak to an attorney." You don't have to be rude or aggressive. In fact, it's better if you're calm and polite, but you can absolutely refuse to answer questions. You have the right to refuse entry to your home unless ICE has a judicial warrant signed by a judge. If ICE comes to your door, do not open it. Ask them to slide the warrant under the door or hold it up to a window where you can see it. Look carefully at what kind of warrant it is. An administrative warrant has ICE letterhead and is signed by an ICE officer. This does not give them legal authority to enter your home. A judicial warrant has a court seal and is signed by a judge. This does give them authority to enter, though you can still ask to see it and verify it before opening the door. If they only have an administrative warrant, you can say, "I do not consent to your entry. Please leave." If they force their way in anyway, do not physically resist. That could result in additional criminal charges. But clearly state, "I do not consent to your entry," so that it's established for any future legal proceedings. Third, if you are arrested by ICE, you have the right to contact your consulate and the right to speak with an attorney before answering any questions or signing any documents. This is crucial. Do not sign anything ICE gives you without speaking to an attorney first. They may ask you to sign a voluntary departure form, which means you agree to leave the country on your own. They may ask you to sign a stipulated removal order, which means you admit you're deportable and agree to be removed. Do not sign these documents without legal counsel, because once you sign them, it becomes extremely difficult to fight your case or apply for any kind of relief. Tell ICE, I want to speak to an attorney before I sign anything. Fourth, document everything if you can safely do so. If ICE comes to your home or stops you on the street, try to note the officers' names and badge numbers, the time and date, what they said, and what they did. If you have your phone accessible and it's safe to do so, consider recording the interaction. This is legal in most jurisdictions, as long as one party to the conversation consents and you are a party. Video evidence of ICE misconduct can be valuable in legal proceedings. But prioritize your safety. If recording puts you at greater risk, don't do it. Fifth, if you have children who are U.S. citizens or who have legal status, make sure they know what to do if you're arrested. Create a family emergency plan. Identify a trusted friend or family member who can take care of your children if you're detained. Give that person power of attorney documents so they can make decisions for your children regarding school, medical care, and other necessities. Keep important documents in a safe place where trusted people can access them. Birth certificates, school records, medical records, immigration documents. Write down phone numbers for immigration attorneys and community organizations that provide legal help. Your children need to know that if ICE arrests you, they should call these numbers and get help immediately. The fear in immigrant communities right now is palpable. Community organizations from Los Angeles to New York are reporting that families are keeping their children home from school because they're afraid to leave their homes. Workers are afraid to go to their jobs. People are avoiding hospitals and clinics even when they need medical care because they're terrified of being arrested. Churches and community centers are holding Know Your Rights workshops that are packed with hundreds of people desperate for information. Immigration attorneys are overwhelmed with requests for consultations and representation, and many can't take new clients because they're already handling crisis cases from people who've been arrested. Let me be very clear about something. ICE cannot legally arrest you based solely on your ethnicity or how you look. Racial profiling is unconstitutional, but the reality is that ICE and local law enforcement working with ICE under 287G agreements are disproportionately targeting Latino communities and other immigrant communities of color. They're conducting enforcement operations in neighborhoods where they assume many residents are undocumented based on demographics. This is creating a climate of fear where people are afraid to live their normal lives. And that's exactly what the policy is designed to do: create fear and pressure people to self-deport. We just covered your constitutional rights during ICE encounters and the pervasive fear gripping immigrant communities. And now we need to talk about concrete protective actions you can take right now and what this enforcement expansion means for the long-term future of immigration in America. First, let's address the question everyone is asking. Are there any forms of relief or protection available if you're undocumented and facing this heightened enforcement climate? The honest answer is that options are extremely limited, but they do exist for certain people, and you need to know what they are. If you've been in the United States for at least 10 years continuously, you have U.S. citizen or permanent resident children or a spouse, and you can demonstrate that your removal would cause exceptional and extremely unusual hardship to those family members, you may be eligible for something called cancellation of removal. This is a form of relief that can only be granted by an immigration judge during removal proceedings, and the bar for proving exceptional hardship is very high. We're talking about situations involving severe medical conditions, disabilities, or other extraordinary circumstances. But if you potentially qualify, this is something you should discuss immediately with an immigration attorney, because it could be your path to legal status. If you're a victim of certain crimes and you cooperated with law enforcement in the investigation or prosecution, you may be eligible for a U visa. If you've suffered substantial physical or mental abuse as a result of domestic violence, you may be eligible for VAWA relief, Violence Against Women Act protections that apply to both women and men. If you were brought to the U.S. as a child by smugglers or traffickers, if you've been abandoned or abused by your parents, and you're under 21, you may be eligible for special immigrant juvenile status. If you have a well-founded fear of persecution in your home country based on race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group, you may be eligible for asylum. Though the asylum system has become increasingly restrictive and the odds of approval have dropped significantly, here's what's important to understand. All of these forms of relief require you to work with a qualified immigration attorney who can assess your eligibility, gather the necessary evidence, and file the applications properly. Do not attempt to navigate these complex applications on your own, and do not trust notarios or immigration consultants who are not licensed attorneys. Immigration fraud is rampant, and unlicensed practitioners often take people's money, file incorrect or fraudulent applications, and make situations worse. If you can't afford a private attorney, there are nonprofit legal service organizations in most major cities that provide free or low-cost immigration legal help. Organizations like Catholic Charities, the International Rescue Committee, the Legal Aid Society, and many others have immigration programs. The waiting lists are long right now because demand is overwhelming, but get your name on those lists. Now let's talk about the 3 critical steps you must take immediately if you're undocumented or if you have undocumented family members. Step 1. Create a comprehensive family emergency plan today. Not tomorrow, not next week. Today. Sit down with your family and have honest conversations about what will happen if you or another family member is arrested by ICE. Identify who will take care of your children. This needs to be a specific person who has agreed to take on this responsibility. Create a power of attorney document that gives that person legal authority to make decisions for your children. You can find power of attorney forms online or work with an attorney to create them, and they need to be notarized to be valid. Gather all important documents, birth certificates for your children, school records, medical records, social security cards, any immigration documents you have, and put them in a safe place where your designated caregiver can access them. Make a list of all your assets, bank accounts, vehicles, property, and make sure your trusted person knows how to access them if needed. Write down phone numbers for immigration attorneys, for your consulate, for community organizations that can help. Keep this information in multiple places, in your home, with your trusted contact, and save digitally where you can access it. Step 2. Know your rights and practice exercising them. I mentioned earlier what your rights are during an ICE encounter, but knowing them intellectually is different from being able to exercise them in the moment when you're terrified and under pressure. Practice with your family. Role-play scenarios where ICE comes to your door or stops you on the street. Practice saying calmly and clearly, "I'm exercising my right to remain silent. I want to speak to an attorney. I do not consent to any search. I do not consent to your entry." Practice not opening the door. Practice asking to see warrants. Practice staying calm even when you're scared. This might feel silly or paranoid, but in a moment of crisis, having practiced these responses can make the difference between protecting yourself and inadvertently giving ICE information or access that harms your case. Teach your children age-appropriate information about what to do if you're arrested, who to call, where important documents are, how to stay safe. This is heartbreaking to have to do, but it's necessary in the current environment. Step 3. If you have any possible pathway to legal status, pursue it immediately with the help of a qualified attorney. Don't wait. Don't procrastinate. Don't assume things will get better or that enforcement won't reach you. If you're married to a U.S. citizen and you entered the country legally on a visa, you may be able to adjust status to permanent residence. If you entered illegally, the process is more complicated, and may require a waiver, but it's still potentially possible. If you have U.S. citizen children over age 21, they may be able to petition for you, though you'd likely need to process through consular processing abroad, which comes with risks. If you have any pending applications, DACA renewal, TPS re-registration, asylum application, U-visa petition, make absolutely sure they're filed correctly and on time. Check your case status regularly online. Respond immediately to any requests for evidence or notices from USCIS. Do not let anything fall through the cracks because of fear or confusion. Beyond these 3 core steps, here are additional protective measures you should consider. First, minimize your visibility and risk exposure. If you don't have to drive, use public transportation or get rides from people with legal status. If you do drive, make absolutely sure your vehicle registration is current, your lights and signals all work, and you follow every traffic law meticulously, because any interaction with police could lead to ICE involvement in 287G jurisdictions. Avoid areas where ICE is known to conduct operations. Some communities have networks that track and share information about ICE activity. Be cautious on social media. Don't post information about your location, your routines, or your immigration status where it could be used to find or target you. Second, understand your workplace rights. Under federal law, employers are required to verify that everyone they hire is authorized to work in the United States. But employers are not required to act as immigration enforcement agents. If ICE shows up at your workplace, you still have the right to remain silent and the right to speak to an attorney before answering questions. However, the practical reality is that if you're arrested at work, you'll likely lose your job. So this is about protecting your legal case, not necessarily your employment. Some workers' rights organizations are advocating for workplace policies where employers agree not to voluntarily cooperate with ICE beyond what's legally required, and where employers give workers notice if ICE requests access to the workplace. If your workplace has a union, the union may be able to negotiate these protections. Third, stay connected to your community and to organizations that are fighting for immigrant rights. There are advocacy groups, legal aid organizations, religious communities, and mutual aid networks that are providing support, resources, and rapid response when ICE conducts raids or arrests. These networks can provide immediate legal assistance, help locate family members who've been detained, organize community support, and advocate for people in immigration proceedings. In cities like Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, Houston, and many others, there are immigrant defense funds that provide free legal representation to people facing deportation. Find out what resources exist in your community and connect with them now, before you need them urgently. Let me address the political and legal challenges to this enforcement expansion, because understanding the bigger picture helps you make informed decisions. Several states and cities have filed lawsuits challenging aspects of the May 7th executive order. California, New York, Illinois, and New Jersey have sued, arguing that the elimination of prosecutorial discretion and the 287G expansion violate federal administrative law and potentially the Constitution. Immigrant rights organizations have filed suits arguing that ICE's enforcement tactics violate Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable searches and seizures. These cases are in early stages as of June 2025, and it could be months or years before there are definitive rulings. Some sanctuary cities and states are refusing to cooperate with ICE despite the federal directives. Jurisdictions like San Francisco, Seattle, New York City, and the state of Illinois have policies prohibiting local law enforcement from honoring ICE detainer requests or participating in immigration enforcement. But these jurisdictions are facing threats of federal funding cuts, and it's unclear how long they can maintain these policies under federal pressure. Congress is also involved. Several Democratic members of Congress have introduced legislation to limit ICE's authority and restore prosecutorial discretion. but these bills have virtually no chance of passing, given Republican control of both chambers. There are also proposals for comprehensive immigration reform that would provide pathways to legal status for long-term undocumented residents. But again, the political reality makes passage extremely unlikely in the near term. The most realistic hope for policy change is either through court rulings that constrain ICE's enforcement authority or through the 2028 presidential election if there's a change in administration. Here's the reality you need to accept. If you're undocumented in the United States right now, you are living in the most hostile enforcement environment in modern history. The risk of arrest and deportation is higher than it's been in decades. There are no guarantees of safety, no easy solutions, and no quick fixes. But you do have rights, you do have options, and you do have the ability to protect yourself and your family to the extent possible. The key is to be informed, to be prepared, to be strategic, and to be connected to people and organizations that can help you. Here's the legal disclaimer. This is general information about immigration enforcement as of June 2025. This is not legal advice, and it's not a substitute for consulting with a qualified immigration attorney about your specific situation. Every case is unique, and the strategies that are appropriate for one person may not work for another. Immigration law is complex and constantly changing, and the stakes are too high to navigate without professional guidance. Let me leave you with this final message to everyone in immigrant communities who is watching this. You are not alone. Millions of people are facing the same fears and the same risks. There are lawyers, advocates, community organizers, faith leaders, and ordinary citizens who are standing with you and fighting for you. Do not give up hope. Do not suffer in silence. Reach out for help. Know your rights, protect your family, and hold on to your dignity and your humanity, even in the face of policies designed to dehumanize you. If this video has given you valuable information, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel for daily updates on immigration enforcement and policy, because the situation is evolving rapidly and staying informed could literally save your family. Share this video with everyone in your community who needs this information. Post it in community groups, send it to family and friends, make sure people know their rights. And if you're someone with resources or legal status, consider how you can help. Donate to immigrant defense funds, volunteer with legal aid organizations, support sanctuary policies in your community. Use your voice and your privilege to stand up for people who are most vulnerable. Your legal status is an ongoing responsibility, but so is our collective responsibility to each other as human beings. Stay safe, stay informed, stay strong, and don't hesitate to get help when you need it. This is too important to face alone.